Let me bring in our panel. Georgina Downer from the Institute of Public Affairs, Simon Banks from Hawker Britain. Very good to see you both. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Just keen for your thoughts on this. There are a couple of theories as to why Bill Shorten isn't producing documents. It might mean that every other Labor MP with a question mark has to do the same, and maybe they don't want that. But Georgina, to you first on this. I mean, do you have a strong view that the opposition leader should be producing evidence, or do you think it's fine for him to say, look, we've dealt with this, I don't need to produce anything?
Well, the alternative opposition leader seems to have produced evidence, Anthony Albanese, so I'm not quite sure why Bill Shorten's not producing it. It really can only lead you to one conclusion, that he doesn't have the documents. To be fair to him, I believe him that he renounced his citizenship in 2006, but just show the documents. I mean, stop this circus. It's not achieving anything other than people just thinking he's a bit shifty.
And do you think the same, Georgina, for people like Michael Keenan and others who haven't produced documents? I mean, George Christensen's scrambling to find some today as well. Should they all, or is it different if you're the opposition leader?
No, I think it should be the same for everyone. I think the public is losing a lot of confidence in Parliament through this circus around the citizenship fiasco. Let's just clear the air. If people have documentation, they should show it. And if they don't have it, they should contact the high commissions or embassies relevant to the citizenship that they may or may not have or have renounced, and get the documentation. It seems to be quite an easy process for those who have shown their letters, like Tony Abbott did the other day. So I don't see why people are not doing this.
And for what it's worth, Fiona Nash's office have just been, in the last few minutes, walking around the evidence that she has now formally renounced any British citizenship. But, of course, the High Court will look at whether she should have done that earlier. Simon Banks, what do you think about this? And to extend what Georgina is saying there, I suppose everyone then who does enter Parliament should have to show some evidence, if they do have a parent born overseas or if they were born overseas, that they're not a dual citizen.
Well, that's obviously not the current requirement under the Electoral Act. MPs do have to sign a statutory declaration that they're not aware, and that they've, or if they are, that they've taken appropriate steps to make sure that, that they're not a citizen of another country. Look, I mean, if people want to change the process and apply that rule right from the get-go, I don't particularly have a strong view one way or other about that. But I don't see how the government thinks that turning what's already a three-ring circus into a five-ring circus is going to help it in any way. I think the Prime Minister's probably done the first smart thing today by not ploughing into this debate and demanding that everyone produce papers. As you've already pointed out, there are plenty of people on the coalition side who haven't gone down that path as well. And also, too, I think at the end of the day, there's only one body that determines this. It's the High Court. And I think just, running around in some kind of a fishing expedition, trying to show that maybe someone didn't, dot their I's or cross their T's or some bizarre little thing like that, when they've otherwise said that they were aware that they might have an issue and that they have taken steps to do it, I think that should be sufficient. I'm certainly accepting that on the coalition side with people like Arthur Sinodinos, for example. I accept their explanation that they did something about it. The only cases that are going forward are those where it's very clear the person either simply did not turn their mind to the fact that they had some form of foreign citizenship, or where they've misled the public through the answers that they've given publicly about it, and a real issue has come up about whether or not they actually did take appropriate steps to get rid of it. And I think if you want to be really simple about this, we do know that the Labor Party has a pretty comprehensive process to vet candidates to make sure that they have complied with Section 44. It's pretty apparent that none of the other major political parties or minor parties have the same degree of process. So if there's a risk here, it's those other parties exposed to the risk.
I mean,
Georgina.
Simon, I sit on the Administrative Committee of the Victorian Liberal Party, so I actually speak from a fair amount of experience here, and we do have extremely rigorous checks when it comes to making sure that people comply with Section 44 of the Constitution for the Victorian division of the Liberal Party. And in fact, even last year we had someone.
Involves, because I think people are intrigued, Georgina, about how that works. What do you do?
So No, we have they submit an application form that asks them various questions to determine whether they meet all the requirements to be a member of Parliament if they were to be successfully pre-selected and then successfully elected at the election. That forms the basis of a statutory declaration. Now, those questions do relate to citizenship, and in fact, even last year we had someone attempt to apply, and when faced with the question of their other citizenship apart from Australia, actually said, well, no, I do have another citizenship, and that they weren't able to apply to be an MP, to be a candidate. So, I mean, I'm very confident in the Liberal Party.
Do you have any parent that was born in the UK or New Zealand, or any parent that was born overseas? Because a lot of them seem like it's never crossed their mind that they might have inherited citizenship.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously cases like Matt Canavan. I mean, who could have thought that his mum would have been applying for citizenship on his behalf, and that the Italian embassy would accept a citizenship application that the individual had not signed themselves. So, I mean, these types of situations are incredibly difficult to foresee, and I really feel sorry for Matt Canavan. But I mean, I agree with Simon. It's going to be up to the High Court to decide. I mean, we can endlessly speculate about whether legal advice is right or wrong, but we'll see what the High Court says.
We will, ultimately. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we will eventually. The same-sex marriage postal survey. So the electoral roll closes tomorrow night. Get enrolled, whichever way you're going to vote, get enrolled, have your say. That's the message. But I'm interested to hear if you both think that message has been delivered loud and clear enough. I see a lot of websites like Vice and Broadsheet and so on that target young readers are tonight, from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock tonight, going black on their website, and anyone who clicks on it is being diverted to the Electoral Commission. There you go. They're the websites that'll divert you to the Electoral Commissions, just to let everyone know, get enrolled to vote yes is what they want you to do for those sites. But Simon Banks, do you reckon there's been enough publicity, advertising, whatever, to let everyone know they need to be enrolled by tomorrow night?
Well, this is the part of the problem with the government's rush process. I mean, now, I understand the statistics from the AEC earlier today was that a bit over 50,000 Australians had kind of gone newly onto the electoral roll. So these are not just people who had updated their details in terms of new valid enrolments. We know that in the younger cohort of voters up to 24, that there are probably around some 500,000 young Australians who would otherwise be eligible to vote who aren't on the electoral roll. So, even if we assumed that 50,000 was just Australians under 24, that still means that 90% of those young Australians who can't, on that age cohort, who aren't currently on the electoral roll, haven't enrolled yet. So my simple advice is do not waste a moment today. It only takes a very short amount of time. Get on the electoral roll. Obviously, you'll have an opportunity, if this ballot isn't struck down by the High Court, to have a say here. But of course, you're going to have a chance to have a say in a whole bunch of elections that are coming up. The next sort of 12 to 18 months is a rich plethora of elections, particularly in New South Wales, Victoria, federally, Queensland, Tasmania. There's plenty of opportunities to vote.
The number of young people who are getting on the roll because of this postal survey may come back to bite the Conservative side of politics. But on the campaign itself, Georgina, we've seen some pretty nasty material in Melbourne plastered around, and that's been condemned rightly by the Prime Minister and others. What do you think about the tone of this campaign? Are you confident everything's going to be fairly civil, or do you think it is going to be a bit of a grubby campaign?
I think the mainstream campaigners will keep it fairly civil, and I hope they continue to keep it civil. I mean, we saw Matt Canavan today write an incredibly thoughtful and respectful opinion piece for The Australian, advocating the case for no. I mean, I would just say to both sides of the debate, you've got to focus on the positive aspects of your case, whether you want people to vote yes or to vote no. I think, you know, a problem with the Yes campaign, some of the fringes of it, is it has been very focused on denigrating the sort of morality of people who do still believe that marriage is only between a man and a woman. And I think that is a strategy that will just end up alienating quite a lot of people who are sitting on the fence on this issue or don't feel very strongly. If they feel that there is a kind of you know, you're being pushed into a corner if you support the status quo because you're somehow morally repugnant, that's not a great campaign strategy. I mean, you know, to draw it out a bit further, I mean, Hillary Clinton learnt this the hard way, calling Donald Trump's supporters deplorables. Well, you know, you don't denigrate the opposing side, especially when there are votes to be won on either side.